turn to the very serious issue of stillbirth. I was what they call a geriatric mother back in the day, and certainly one of the things I was made aware of was that stillbirth was a possibility, and it was much more a possibility as a geriatric mother. That's someone aged over 35. My two guests in the studio, unfortunately, have both had first-hand experience of stillbirth, but they've gone on to do research and to help other mums. Joining me, our Associate Professor Jane Warland, midwife academic at University SA. Welcome, Jane.
Thanks for having me, Deb.
Lovely to have you in here. And someone who I've spoken to before, Claire Foord, the founder of Still Aware. Lovely to have you here.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Jane, I might start with you because the research, you're co-author of one of these pieces of research. A couple of independent studies been released this week in the hope of dramatically reducing stillbirths.
Yes.
So just if you could tell us about the study that you've been involved with. It's really about monitoring your child in utero, isn't it?
Yes, so the big study that we've published this a couple of weeks ago now was from a case control study, which is almost the highest level evidence that you can get, short of doing a randomised control trial, which obviously you can't do for stillbirth because you can't randomise people to have a stillbirth. So very strong evidence that says to us that not only do we need to be concerned about the baby who moves less, but the baby who suddenly has a flurry of activity and also the baby who's moving weaker. We also need to be concerned about babies who change in their pattern. So, for example, if you normally feel your baby moving at bedtime and you don't, that's also something to be concerned about. So really anything that the baby does that's different from what the baby normally does, the mother needs to report to her maternity care provider.
So it really comes back to knowing your own body. And
Yes.
knowing your baby's own patterns.
Absolutely.
And being attuned to those.
Yes.
And having trust in your own view or your
Yes.
own intuition if things change.
Absolutely.
Is one of the problems that maybe women who have had a stillbirth have felt these things going on but haven't reported it?
Yes, we think that that's likely to be the case. One of the triggers for this particular study was that we had a big summit meeting in Minneapolis a number of years ago now, and there were a lot of bereaved parents there, and this study was actually generated by questions that they asked. And one of the bereaved mums, I remember very clearly, said, I remember very strongly that my baby had a sudden crazy time where the baby just went bananas. Is that any kind of concern? Do you think that other parents have felt it? And interestingly, even Claire felt that before Alfie died. So it actually seems like it's perhaps a little bit more common than we have previously even thought.
Had there been any information gathering done in hospitals where women have had a stillbirth about these types of things to actually gain information from the mother direct, or are we retrospectively now trying to obtain that information?
We're gathering it from people who've experienced a stillbirth and also, importantly for this study, people who experienced a live birth. So interestingly, with this particular study, we had women who were in the case group, the stillbirth group, saying, my baby went crazy, my baby went wild, ballistic, nuts, bananas, those sorts of words. The controls, only one of the 500 controls use words like that. And she sounded like she was a near miss because she said, my baby went crazy, it concerned me, I went to hospital. They checked out the baby, it wasn't well. I ended up needing an emergency cesarean section. The baby was born blue, needed to be resuscitated, and then the baby is fine now. So that to us indicates that if the mother acts quickly when this happens, that there may be a short window of opportunity for her to save her baby's life.
It's a big responsibility on a mother, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. But mothers have got responsibility anyway, and that responsibility really starts from the moment that you conceive. We have responsibility for our toddlers. You know, if our toddlers aren't well, we take them to the doctor. If we feel that our unborn baby is not well, we should do the same thing. We should take ourselves and our baby to
and
the
not
doctor.
be worried that we're going to be bothering somebody, or, gee, I'm not sure if you have any of those fears, better to get it checked out.
As a midwife myself, I would much rather reassure you 1,000 times than have to say those awful words, "I'm sorry, there's no heartbeat."
Yeah. I can imagine listeners right now who've had those words said to them, and the trauma of that will stay with you forever.
Absolutely.
It's a lifelong grief.
Absolutely.
Might bring Claire into the conversation. Claire, this is very high-level research, but is it consistent with the things that you've been hearing through your work with Still Aware and from your own personal experience?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, we're so thankful that there is research to back all of this up. But we've known for a really long time now that the mother is the place to go in terms of understanding that baby. So it's terrific now that we have solid evidence to back that up. And now it's really time for the clinicians and the medicos to really get that too, to say, okay, well, I need you to come in and tell me about your baby because you have the best understanding of that little one inside you. You're the only one who gets 24/7 with Bub. I only get a split moment. So it's really important that mum speaks up. But it's not just mum too, it's the whole unit of care. So that is partner, husband, mother, whoever that birthing partner is too, is to really help that mother feel empowered to stand up for her and her baby. And absolutely, we have many women say to us that the baby not only decreased, but rapidly increased. They were scared, they were worried, but didn't go in. They waited until their next appointment or they waited till the next day. They didn't know who to call at night. It's really, really sad, but it's also incredibly disappointing that the system continues to fail people. So I hope that this actually makes people stand up and go, you know what, we need to take action and really empower families to parent their babies whilst they're inside, not just after they're born.
Exactly. It's information that should be given to all mothers. I mean, obviously the rate of stillbirth is high in geriatric mothers, 35 and over, but all mothers need to understand that they have got the best knowledge about their baby of anybody on the planet, and if they have any fears, they do need to act upon it.
Absolutely, and that's something that I didn't know. My child, so Alfie, her movements decreased. Then they rapidly increased to the point where I felt like she wanted to try and get out, and I said, this baby wants out. And what did I say straight after to my husband was, oh, actually, no, a baby slows down before it's born. That's what everyone's been feeding me. So, no, she's not coming. And then 2 a.m. following that time, so that was 7 p.m. at night, 2 a.m. was the last time I would ever feel her move. So I had a moment. And if I was given the tools that we give through Still Aware about monitoring a baby's movements, reporting any change immediately and not waiting until someone says, hey, I can see you now, or here's your appointment, Alfie would be here.
Yeah.
And so it's about making sure that everybody gets this information and making it a mandation, so making it that every clinician has to give this information. Anyone who has any care of a pregnant woman has to give this information to them, because without that empowerment, they won't speak up.
Yeah. And so you're left with not only the immense grief of not having that child in your life that you were anticipating, but also you're left with a sense of, why didn't I do something?
Right.
Or why didn't I know? Why didn't somebody tell me?
That's right.
So Jane, I'll just bring it back to you then. Working as a midwife academic, is this information getting across to practicing midwives, to obstetricians, in fact, to GPs who are at the very first port of call often when a woman is pregnant?
I'm certainly doing my best. I am involved in education of midwives. Claire's doing her best with Still Aware, being involved in education of all kinds of maternity care providers in Australia, across Australia. But this kind of information is, at the moment, also, I think, needs to be brought into a program that maternity care providers are mandated to do once a year, in much the same way as they are mandated to look at the way that we electronically monitor the baby and make sure that they're up to date with that. They also need to be up to date with these new advances. You mentioned very briefly the other paper that came out earlier this week.
I would like to get back to that, because that is about induction.
Yeah. Finding that
for particular groups of women, they may not even have a gestational period up to 40 weeks, but if you're in that danger zone, and what are the danger zones for stillbirth? There are certain predispositions, aren't there?
Yes, there certainly are. But gestation is one of them, and certainly for certain groups, the Southeast Asian population we know tend to have a shorter gestation, so they tend to have a due time which is 38 weeks rather than 40 weeks. But I think that we need to be really careful that we don't just say there's a blanket response to prevention of stillbirth.
I mean, we should just say that research was saying that perhaps if a person that had potential markers that could mean that they are more predisposed to having a stillbirth, that they should be induced a week or two before their due date. That's what the research was saying, wasn't it?
Yes. And I think that we, as I said, we do need to be careful about just saying, well, we'll induce everybody and we'll prevent stillbirth. We do need to be careful about looking at the individual's risks. So, for example, in your case, if you were older, but that might have been your only risk factor, so they might not necessarily then say, well, we need to induce you. But if you were older and they were monitoring your baby and your baby was small and you were saying, hey, the baby's moving a bit less, those risk factors are the ones that are then mounting up and should make any care provider say, 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 is adding up to a lot of risk factors now, and perhaps we should consider inducing you.
My own personal experience as a geriatric mother, which nobody really likes to be called, but that's the term if you're over 35, was in fact that I had a placental placement, meaning that I wasn't very as much in touch with my baby, which I imagine some women would have, so it makes it more difficult to judge. But definitely things did go a bit pear-shaped for me at the end, and I was over the due time and did have to be induced, and I think that for me it was a lucky thing.
It's really interesting that you just mentioned where your placenta lied and where it lay. So basically, I'm assuming that you're saying your placenta was at the front.
So I didn't really feel the kicks.
So what's really interesting about that, and that's actually also something that is fed to women and is also a myth in a sense too, that because your placenta sits at the front, you won't feel the movements. Now, the fact is, you will still feel your baby moving within you, within your own body. So it's really important to get to know who and how that baby is, regardless of where your placenta lies, but it may not be as obviously moving. So whatever that consistency is, or whatever that normal pattern is, regardless of where your placenta is, should still remain the same. And that not to worry if you need to call, and also not to placate yourself and say, oh, well, my placenta's at the front, that's why the baby's a bit cushioned and that's why it's not moving so much. There's all these myths that we need to dispel too, like a baby doesn't slow down before it's born. It doesn't matter where your placenta is for you to be able to feel it yourself. It doesn't, the fact is 10 movements isn't what matters. It's about what your baby is doing in there. So it's really important to get to know your own individual baby, report any changes immediately, and act as a parent now, because you have complete control of that, of your pregnancy too. You're part of that care unit, and that means baby, mum, and care provider. And if you remove one of those wedges, that care unit is missing, it's lacking. So you are just as equally important as your obstetrician, midwife, doctor.
More important in a way, yeah. Well, I really admire the work that you're both doing. Claire Foord, founder of Still Aware, which is out there putting this message to mums, which is fantastic. Associate Professor Jane Warland, a midwife academic at University SA. Both of you bereaved parents. Emma, your loss, Jane, and Alfie, Claire. Thank you for taking what were personal tragedies and helping other parents and would-be parents. And